First of all, I want to mention that I'm not going to mention anything related to AI or LLMs, so any CISOs can leave. But I don't have any POCs nor code to show. So if you're very technical, you can leave too. But the last one has to stay, because if not, I'm going to feel very sad. So last one has to stay. Okay, let's kick it off. I shouldn't be doing that. Okay. I'm an incident responder at Salesforce. I've been in the industry for many years. I live in Granada, but I'm originally from Argentina. I did a master's degree there in cybersecurity, which I truly recommend. It's amazing. And well, I have a lot of certifications that prove that I am not just an idiot, I'm a certified one. This is our agenda today. I'm going to talk a bit about threat hunting and how are we doing it at Salesforce. I'm going to talk about one hunt we ran last year for about 2 months, pretty long one, specifically targeting exfiltration. And then AQA, if anyone has any questions. So, what is threat hunting? Essentially, the objective of threat hunting is to reduce the dwell time, which is the time in between when an incident actually happened, or a breach occurred, and the time you actually detected it. Obviously, the first thing you can think is, well, why don't you just create more detections instead of having a team just going to hunt it? Well, because mostly what we are going to do with threat hunting, or what we are going to attempt, is to do things that are not easily found with a simple detection, that may need correlation between events that cannot be easily done with a SEM, or that could be prone to many false positives, which require a lot of pivoting and maybe too much for a security operations center. We also try to focus on techniques that may be advanced and maybe too much for a tier 1 to assess when there is a bunch of information. That's the main objective. In reality, you will have other objectives that you will meet along the way, because in most hunts, you won't really find the advanced threat actor you are looking for. But we will come to that later. Now, I am mentioning here the CMMC, it's a maturity model from the Department of Defense, that basically sets 5 levels of maturity model. And threat hunting is mentioned only on level 4 or 5, which means this is not anyone should be running. It's probably for companies that have a pretty mature situation, and at least in terms of cybersecurity. And the pyramid of pain was really targeted to how difficult it is for a threat actor to recover once you have done something against them. For example, if you block their domains, it's pretty easy for them to create a new one. If you block a tool they are using, they may have to learn a new tool. If you're locking down a whole TTP with a prevention policy, it's difficult for them to change their tactics, their procedures. It's not impossible, but it takes more time for them. And this applies to threat hunting very well in terms of it is pretty easy to hunt for hashes, IPs, and domains. When you are creating hunts that are targeted to tools or specifically TTPs, it becomes more complex and time-consuming. Now, this is how we are doing it in Salesforce. First, we build an initial hypothesis. I'm going to mention how we do it in the next slide. We do some research about how we can do the hunt for that hypothesis and how applicable it is. Then we do a review of the hunt. We modify it if it's needed. We do the hunt and create a report and document it and create a bunch of needs that will need to be covered after the hunt, as security uplifts and the like. Now, this is the hunt we run. As you can see, the part, this scratch, is the initial hunt. The final hunt was basically the one involved with any protocol, but it's essentially detecting a high amount of traffic being exfiltrated, specifically from user endpoints to SSH that was replaced with to any protocol and only external destination. So I am avoiding anything related to staging to move it between internal hosts before exfiltration intentionally. This, or how we came up with this hypothesis in particular, I cannot specify a lot about that because privacy concerns from my company, but you should be informed by, for example, a threat intel team that tells you, hey, your adversaries are using that technique, or maybe if you have a red team that just did it, that's a very good kicking point to actually, okay, let's hunt for that because they may have done it. I'm not saying that happened on Salesforce. Now, this is the background research. After we created the initial hypothesis, you have to do a lot of investigation to first, obviously, have you run any previous hunts related to this? In our case, no, which may seem strange, but it's quite logical. When you are running hunts, going for exfiltration is not the first thing you do. It's something actually you do after you run many hunts, mostly because you are going for what already happened, and when they already achieve the actions on objective, which is they already have the information. And if you're a big company, you probably gonna be aware of that because they are gonna publish it somewhere. So you will normally start with hunts targeting persistent or lateral movement or any other previous step in the chain of the attacks. The second thing is looking for which security solutions, tools, logs we can use for this one, which is pretty obvious. Firewall logs, VPN logs. If you have any network monitoring logs like SIG, you can use that as well. And from that, we also use EDR logs, mostly, EDR telemetry, mostly to pivot from the finding to, okay, what process actually executed that, and from there, deeper if needed. We then define, in our case, exfiltration scenarios, because when you start to dig in the possibilities of how that can happen, there are many unusual situations. For example, what if they are using the VPN, but they are in the office? How the traffic moves through the network is different than when they are on their homes and using a split tunnel. Some things may be going directly to the destination outside the internet. Some things may be going through our networks. So the visibility changes specifically because each type of log will provide you with a different set of information. So we defined many scenarios. I'm just mentioning 3 here. We defined like 12, mostly to give you some understanding of what we're targeting and what we were not. That one, virtual desktop infrastructure. From the network point of view, that's kind of on the cloud in our case, but from usage point of view, it's a desktop being used by a user. And they use them interchangeably as any other asset they use. So it would fall on this type of exfiltration, which was targeting user endpoints. We left it out for a different hunt because of the complexities that were involved into the logs that were there. But there were a lot of scenarios like that one. And the last one is the reason we actually changed the hypothesis, which is we reviewed all the detections we have for exfiltration, which were on the hundreds, and we probably noticed that we should have detected that if it happened at some point, because there was a detection rule for that. It was just not firing. We detected that issue, we fixed it, and we decided to change the hypothesis. I'm going to go into details why we choose that hypothesis and not another one later, but from SSH you could have decided to go for FTP. We decided to go for any protocol, which is a big broad as a hunt. That's why it took 2 months. Now, The execution, as I mentioned before, we set a time frame. In our case, was 30 days, which is pretty short for hunt, but that's because the amount of logs we were gathering to analyze was huge. So you obviously do the search between source IP and destination IP port to determine how much traffic was exfiltrated. We put it in buckets for 24 hours and 1 hour to observe outliers. For those outliers, we move to the EDR, look at the process tree, see if it makes sense. If it's suspicious, we report it to our tier 1 analyst to start further investigation, and we keep looking at the other findings. And if it's a false positive, we just flag it and move on. Now, I mentioned before, it's very possible that you will not find the actual threat actors. I obviously cannot specify much of what we found. I can tell you that we did have findings, and we created a couple of reports to our tier 1 that ended up in reviews from our CSERT, which is also me and other people. We do threat hunt on the side. But also we have many other relevant findings, which is, as said before, one, finding the errors in the detection logic that was implemented, finding that gaps in the detection logic, like this rule could be implemented or this other rule, log sources that should be collected that were missing, problems with enrichment of certain IPs in certain logs, problem with logs not being parsed, which is not super important now, but because I do incident response as well, I know that that will become very important later if I don't have that field well parsed. And well, a couple of general security uplifts. I put an example here, like, okay, let's move away from block listing IPs, domains, blah blah, and applications to an allow listing methodology, at least in the user endpoints. Obviously, all of those security uplifts are recommendations that you send somebody to take care of. You can do hunting, incident, and all of that. And some of the issues we found are related to, first, Salesforce is known to acquire many companies. And when you acquire a new company, you have a whole new set of technology stacks. So you will find that they were using a different VPN or different firewalls, or their traffic was routed different for some reason until they are completely merged as two companies. So you will have to actually look at very different set of logs. You will also find, and this is pretty common, split tunnels being used, or similar if you have, for example, Zscaler, which uses a zero trust network. It's pretty similar. Basically, you are sending certain traffic from the user endpoint directly to the destination instead of going through your normal internal channel of go to the office, to the firewall, etc., which creates different paths, specifically in a company as complex as Salesforce, which uses multi-cloud for a lot of their products, and that means that users are interacting with clouds in unusual ways. And that's very applicable for how the VPN split tunnels can be configured. The third point is about SIG, which we may or may not be using, but the con.log is one of the basically files that is created by SIG for HTTP. It creates an http.log, ssh.log, con.log. It gets created for basically any non-standard protocols, and that log file tends to be neglected because it's the one that generates the most amount of traffic. So that's a catch to be aware of. And SSL inspection not being enabled can be very problematic during a hunt like this, mostly because when you pivot to the processes to see, okay, I see a user uploading 50 gigabytes to Dropbox. If I go to the process and find that it's just the Dropbox app, there is nothing like super suspicious about that. Obviously, if it's not in agreement with the policy because we use any other service, it's something that I can send for review, but it's not a major finding. And if you have SSL inspection enabled, you can at least, and once you find that, go to look at your traffic and see, okay, what type of information was this user moving, to identify if it's just a policy violation. You have to tell them stop doing that, or actually be worried that they were moving information as an insider threat. And a couple of lessons learned that we had on this talk. Sorry. I'm getting dehydrated. Let's change that. On this hand, I mentioned before that you won't have high priority or very concerning security findings in most of your hands, which is true. You should expect to be running multiple hands until you find something that is very concerning. So if you run multiple hands and don't find anything, don't get discouraged. Keep going. You will find something eventually that supports that it's okay to be investing into this. Staying on the target is quite important. When you start looking at user endpoints, the processes that they run, at least in complex environments, you will find a lot of, well, really fucked up shit. Let's put it that way. That you want to understand, you will want to go after that, like what the hell they are running these processes, doing this other thing. Don't do that. You have to stay on target. You will have many findings like that. Just make a note and review that later, or send it for somebody else to analyze, like your security operations center, and keep on target. Like you are there to hunt for a specific hypothesis. It's really easy to get deviated or sidetracked from that. Avoiding complex hypotheses, I think that this is the main issue we run off, basically because we decided to move it to any protocol that is way too big for a hand that is expected to run for 2 weeks. That's why it took 2 months. We should have run something more targeted, like, okay, it's not a SSH, let's check with our Intel team what is the second one that they may be using, maybe FTP, and that would be more targeted and can be completed in a shorter period of time. Ideally, you would want a hunt to be running for 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, not a lot more than that. If you have any DLP or Viva or your SAM or anything that can do that, obviously it saves you a lot of effort because this is already highlighting anomalies in your traffic. So you save a lot of time in analyzing those logs manually, if it has good detection rules, of course. And finally, well, if you can automate your hunt, that's ideal. It's normally not easy to do because that's the main reason we are running the hunt. It's because the detections for it are very prone to false positives, so that's why we are doing it in a manual way. So ideally, at least you want to automate part of the process. With all the work you have done, you have queries ready to execute it automatically. Then you will need an analyst to do further steps to review the findings. But if we know that cannot be handled by a security operations center that is already flooded on other situations, it's a good opportunity to automate something that you can run later without all the overhead included in the hunt, which means you can repeat this hunt later in time with a lot less effort. And that's all I have. I think I'm good with time, right?
Great.
I love it. Thank you.
That's a great presentation, thank you. Do we have some questions for Fabian? We have one question there. I can be the runner, that's okay. Thank you. I'll try and be quick.
Hi, Fabian. As you said, like threat hunting team is often in between the intelligence and the SOC, right? But I was wondering, how close are you really working with all those groups? Is it
The
like...
question is too difficult. Please, next question. No, it's fine. Well, mostly we think with our threat intel team to define which hunts are the most important ones to focus on, because they have the intelligence of which our most advanced adversaries. And with the SOC, our main interaction is, as I said before, mostly to deviate all the findings we have. Like at some point, you find an unusual process. Once you cross a personal threshold that you say, this is too suspicious, let's send it to the SOC, do it. If it doubts, you do it. But what usually follows is they come back to you with further questions like, how did you find this, blah, blah, blah. You give them some context and they continue the analysis. As I said, we are also, the people that we are doing the hunts are also incident responders on the side. So if that gets escalated, we may end up grabbing that again later if it's a big thing. But that's the main interactions we have with both teams.
Any other questions? I have one, if that's okay. We've got quite a diverse audience here. No offence calling these young guys out, but we've got 15, 16-year-olds right through to people on the sort of security leadership side, so we've got a nice balance of people here. If someone is hearing what you're doing and thinks that's pretty cool, obviously you're quite advanced in your career, you've been doing this a long time, how can someone get to do what you do? What are the skill sets, what background should they take for that sort of journey?
Well, my career path was a bit unusual. I don't even have a
Everybody says
degree.
that.
But mostly, my career started as a SOC analyst. So I was always near operations. I had 1 year as a security engineer on the side, and then I came back really fast to the incidents. But ideally, my main focus was always trying to do courses or certifications that could help me grow my understanding on the career. At some point in my career, I decided to go for a master's, which is, may sound strange because I don't have a degree, but it's because it's a master's given at the university that allows me to do it without giving me an actual degree that allows me to do a doctorate then, a PhD, but gives me all the tools I need to actually become better. So it's not about the title, it's about the actual learnings. But I think everyone can find its own way. This is my way, but there are many possibilities on how to reach that. I think that most companies are looking for SOC analysts on tier one, so it shouldn't be difficult to find offers. I know that sometimes they are kind of saying, we need a SOC 1 analyst that has 10 years of experience. No, that's not going to happen.
They're already level 2,
but send your application anyway. In very short time, they're going to realize, nah, we're not going to find anyone better than this person. Let's call it for an interview. So don't worry.
What would be the foundational skill though? So let's say I want to be a SOC analyst, level 1. What should someone, and not, I know we're in a university, but I'm not going to say degree, but what are the technical foundations?
So it depends on what you want to become. I consider myself more of a generalist. Like I'm not an expert on Macs or Linux or Windows, but I decided to do courses on each of one to become more like a generalist and have a bit of knowledge on each. But you should, at least I started with network security. So network security, for sure, you need to understand the basics. A bit of each operating system will help you a lot. Understanding how the operating system works at the basic level, and then investigate about forensic artifacts or how the logs are generated on each, and then understand how to look through those logs. Those probably are the most helpful skills I got.
Cool, thank you so much. Well, let's thank Fabian again.